Tucked away at the very back of the Old Testament, there's this collection of 12 books that are super easy to just flip past, the Minor Prophets. But what if that word minor doesn't mean what we all think it means? Today, we're going to unpack this incredible collection. So let's get right to it. That word minor, it immediately makes you think less important, doesn't it? Like, are these guys just the opening act for the big names like Isaiah and Jeremiah? Well, the real reason for that label is actually way more practical than you'd think.
Yeah, it all comes down to a really simple physical reason that has absolutely nothing to do with their message or how important they were.
The term actually comes from the famous theologian Augustine of Hippo. He called them prophetae minores, but not because they were second-rate. Nope. It was purely about logistics. Think about it. These 12 books were short enough that they could all fit together on a single scroll. The books of Isaiah or Jeremiah? No way. Those were massive. So minor isn't about their stature, it's literally just about their size. Okay, so now that we've cleared that up, they're not minor in importance, what are we actually getting into when we open these books? It's not just one style of writing, it's a really fascinating mix of different literary forms. Generally, you'll find they fall into about 3 different buckets. Sometimes the prophet is talking right to you, in the first person, sharing their own story. Other times, the story is told about them, almost like a short biography. But the real heart and soul of these books, what they're famous for, are the divine oracles and speeches. And they're usually written in this really powerful, unforgettable poetry. But there's always a but, right? There's one really famous exception that kind of breaks the mold, the Book of Jonah. This isn't a collection of things Jonah said. It's one continuous adventure story about him. A story about a prophet on the run from God who really, really does not want to do his job. And this right here is probably the best way to wrap your head around the whole collection. Don't try to read it like a single sprawling novel. It's much more like a carefully curated anthology, a collection of short stories, poems, and memoirs, each with its own unique voice, all gathered together in one place. So that brings up a huge question. How did 12 totally separate scrolls become one unified collection? Well, the way they were brought together actually reveals a pretty deliberate purpose. It tells a story all on its own. Scholars have basically been detectives, piecing together the history from some key clues. Our first big break comes from outside the Bible, around 190 BCE, when a writer mentions the 12 prophets, as if it's already a well-known thing. Then, just a few decades later, around 150 BCE, the Dead Sea Scrolls show them all lined up in an order that's super close to the one we have today. All this evidence points to the final collection being put together sometime during what's known as the Persian period. So, was there a method to the madness? You bet. A really popular theory suggests it was a 2-step process. First, they collected the books from Hosea to Micah to really dig into the hard questions of sin and injustice. Then, later, the second half, from Nahum to Malachi, was added to start offering some answers, some resolutions. For a community that was wrestling with its own history, this created an incredibly powerful story arc, from facing your failures to finding a path toward hope. Okay, so we can see a thematic structure here, but what about the actual order of the individual books? I mean, it might seem kind of random at first, but there is a logic at play, even if it's a little complicated. The main organizing principle is roughly chronological. The earliest prophets, guys from the 8th century BCE, they tend to show up first. But, and this is a big but, it's not a strict timeline. The editors who put this all together clearly cared about thematic links too. They sometimes put books right next to each other because they both talked about a key topic, like the fate of Jerusalem, even if the authors lived generations apart. And you can see this complexity in action right here. This standard order puts Hosea and Amos, both from the 8th century, right near the start. But who's sandwiched right between them? Joel, a prophet whose date is, well, totally uncertain. It's a dead giveaway that chronology wasn't the only rule. And get this order wasn't even universal. Other ancient traditions, like the Eastern Orthodox Church, arranged them differently, which just goes to show you that the sequence was a bit flexible. And this whole question of timing and ordering drops us right into the middle of a huge scholarly debate. We're not just talking about when the final collection was put together, but how much the original prophecies might have been changed and edited over hundreds of years. So, in recent years, a major idea in biblical scholarship has been something called the Persian turn. The theory goes like this. While the original prophets might have lived much earlier, The books as we actually have them today were significantly edited and shaped hundreds of years later during the Persian era. Basically, scribes were reinterpreting these ancient prophecies for their own time.
So you end up with these two competing ideas. On one side, the Persian turn theory argues for heavy, late-stage editing. But on the other side, scholars push back. They'll point to a book like Hosea and say, hey, wait a minute, its structure looks a lot like prophecies from the Neo-Assyrian Empire, which was around at the same time as Hosea. And since we know those texts weren't heavily re-edited, it kind of makes you wonder, why should we assume the biblical books were?
And this is exactly why some scholars are urging caution. As this quote gets at, if we just attribute everything to one period of editing, we risk oversimplifying what was most likely a long, complex process. These books weren't just written in a single moment. They grew, they evolved over centuries, with layers of tradition being added over time. And when you get right down to it, this whole debate really challenges our modern ideas about authorship. When a text is copied and edited and expanded over hundreds of years, where does the original author end and the long line of editors begin? It's a fascinating puzzle, and it's a powerful reminder that these ancient books have a life story all their own.